Morning, everybody. If everyone could take their seats. We're about to begin. Welcome to meeting 3 of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Welcome to members of the committee, city staff, and members of the public. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next. Of course, you can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, and smartphone at toronto.ca/council. We acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga, the Credit, the Ashwaubenon, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga, the Credit. I'm getting better each week. Councillor Layton?
That was a little bit better.
That was an improvement. That's good stuff. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? And this is the last time I'll read the next couple of paragraphs. Members, I want to take a moment to remind you that when you declare an interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, you're now required to file a written declaration with the clerk. The clerk has provided blank forms to every member's office, and I ask you to complete them and bring them with you to the meetings each time you declare an interest. If you forgot to bring the form, the clerk's staff can provide you with one, which you will complete and submit before the end of the meeting. If you need more information on our obligations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, I refer you to the Integrity Commissioner's Interpretation Bulletin. I believe the clerk has a few copies as well, and if you require advice, I encourage you to reach out to the Integrity Commissioner directly. I think my introductory remarks are going to be longer than the meeting itself. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the March 18th, 2019 meeting? Councillor McKevy, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 1, status update to the biodiesel strategy for the City of Toronto.
Could hold that, please.
Councillor Layton is holding that.
If you could, there's a speaker as well. I'd love just like a 5-minute presentation on the findings.
There is one scheduled.
There is
yes.
one. Hey.
Yes, it'll be very exciting.
Thank you.
Item 2, contract award for request for proposal 9155-187147, professional services for local and trunk sewer asset condition assessment. Anyone like to hold that item? Oh, Councillor Layton, are you moving that?
Sure.
Councillor Layton is moving that. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 3, contract awards for tender number call 321-2018, tender call 322-2018, 2019 local road resurfacing program. There is a speaker for that, so I'll hold it. All right. A contract for the provision of transmission operations optimizer, upgrade, support, and maintenance services from IBI Group, Inc. Would someone like to move the item? Councillor Layton, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 5, Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant Landform Project.
I don't have any questions.
You're holding that? Held by Deputy Mayor Councillor Wong. Number 6, Eglinton Crosstown Light Rail Transit Traffic Regulation Amendments. There is a deputation. We will hold that item. And there's also correspondence from Councillor Matlow, which has also been circulated. I promise you it's not about the Scarborough subway. It is about the Eglinton Crosstown. So you can take a look at that. Just a note, I have to speak in the council chamber for Caregiver Appreciation Day at about 10:15, so I'm going to be handing the chair over to Vice Chair McKelvey. I do apologize, there was one more item, plus we have 2 items to add. Two new items. Number 7, coordinated street furniture program agreement update.
Is that to add?
No.
Oh, I have questions on that.
Question held. Okay, we have two items from,
I want to see a hand warmer.
we have two items that have been circulated for new business. One is City of Toronto's Stormwater Management Program, and the other one is Vision Zero 2.0. All those in favor of adding these two items from the mayor's office?
Those are just to add?
Just to add? Opposed? That is carried. So we have the two items added. Go back to item number 1, status update of the biodiesel strategy for the City of Toronto. I believe there's a presentation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Dr. Heather McLean from the University of Toronto, and I'll have her introduce her team to do the presentation.
Great, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you to the chair and the committee for providing us this opportunity to outline the results of our study. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, collaborators on the study. Stu Porter here on my far right, Brad Seville on the right, and Daniel Posen on the right, as well as Carolyn Vandegrim, who is in the audience. I'm the project lead, and so I'm going to do the formal presentation and then be assisted in the questions by my team. So the project evaluated the impact of using biodiesel, renewable diesel, two different types of fuels, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the City of Toronto fleet vehicles. A brief outline of the presentation. I'm aiming for about 10 minutes for the presentation. Go through the context, distinguish biodiesel and renewable diesel, talk about bio-based diesel considerations that are key for the city and their decision-making, and then go into the final recommendations. So annually, as most of you are aware, the City of Toronto Fleet Services and the TTC use about 100 million litres of diesel fuel. This is currently blended with 5% by volume biodiesel and resulting in a blend called B5. The emissions of the fleet services and TTC total over 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, which is about 4% of Toronto's transportation emissions. So our aim in our study was identify and balance the benefits and risks of increased use of bio-based diesel in the city's fleet vehicles, including the fleet services and TTC. So to distinguish, there were two types of fuels that we looked at in our study: biodiesel and hydrogenation-derived renewable diesel, also referred to as HDRD and sometimes referred to as green diesel. These can be produced from the same feedstocks, which are mainly vegetable oils and animal fats. And in Canada, biodiesel is produced from canola oil, soybean oil, animal fats, and used cooking oil. Animal fats are often referred to as tallow, and used cooking oil, yellow grease as well. These feedstocks can also be used in the production of HDRD, which has not yet currently produced in Canada. Biodiesel and HDRD are chemically different fuels, and biodiesel is chemically different from petroleum diesel due to the production process, and it has a moderate price premium over petroleum diesel. HDRD is chemically equivalent to petroleum diesel, but has a higher price premium over petroleum diesel. Any of these fuels, petroleum diesel or biodiesel or HDRD, fall under the Canadian General Standards Board Biodiesel or CGSB specifications. These are the most stringent biodiesel standards in the world, and they cover things like cloud point, which ensures the operability of the fuels in cold weather in particular, and this is a key issue for Toronto, and one sometimes expressed as concern related to biodiesel use in particular. They also protect against vehicle damage and premature filter changes through limits on water, particulate contamination, and cold soak tests. And they also have oxidation stability test, which ensures the stability of the fuel during fuel storage. We'll talk in a moment about cold weather operability, but these standards, as I mentioned, are more stringent than the US standards. They are the most stringent in the world, so more stringent than the ASTM standards that would govern the biodiesel or other fuels in the US. Regarding cold weather operability, cloud point is the main parameter that is looked at with respect to cold weather operability of these fuels. It applies not just to biodiesel, but also to any type of diesel fuel, and the cloud point must be lower than the ambient temperature in which the fuel is used. Biodiesel is generally known as having poorer low temperature properties than diesel, particularly warmer cloud points, and it's more difficult to meet cloud point specification in the winter with higher level biodiesel blends. So our data suggests that B5 blend would be acceptable year-round, and that is currently what the city is doing, but temperature may limit B10 in the winter, so increasing to 10% biodiesel in the winter. Biodiesel produced from soy and canola generally have lower cloud points, so are better fuels for the winter than something produced from tallow, which was the animal fats, or yellow grease, something like you use cooking oil. They have warmer cloud points due to their properties, so the fuels produced from those feedstocks would be more frequently used in the summers. The blended fuel must meet the CGSB seasonal temperatures for cloud point for the region of use, and this would be the responsibility of the fuel provider to the city. We reviewed the infrastructure used by the City of Toronto and determined that there would be no infrastructure changes required if a higher level of biodiesel were used in the fleet vehicles, or a higher level of HDRD as well, because the fuel would be delivered as a blended fuel, and the supplier would be responsible to manage cloud point. The fuel turnover in storage tanks was also deemed to be sufficient given the CGSB fuel stability standards. So that would also not be a concern. Looking at the vehicles that the city uses, we reviewed all of the fleet services and TTC vehicles, their specifications. We also reviewed gensets and storage tanks. We found that for fleet services, about 50% of vehicles had a warranty for up to use of B20, so that would be 20% biodiesel, 80% by volume petroleum diesel. This was primarily later model vehicles, so more recent vehicles. The remainder were warranted for B5. For the TTC, about 80% of the buses were warranted up to B20, the remainder for B5 again. It should be noted that buses use 90% of the diesel used by the city, and therefore having the high number of buses warranted for B20 is important. There were no compatibility issues expected in using up to B20, though, even in absence of a warranty. This is based on prior experience in other jurisdictions. So in conclusion, we believe, in conclusion related to the vehicle and the infrastructure, that backed by analysis of other jurisdictions, the biodiesel blends up to B20 could be used without engine issues or increased maintenance, provided the biodiesel meets CGSB standards. We looked at experience in many other jurisdictions, ones in Ontario that have experience with B4 up to B20 blends, primarily B4 in winter, B20 potentially of some jurisdictions in the summer, and it's been used successfully. There's also experience in other jurisdictions outside of Ontario. Fuel cost implications. So the city, we had looked at historic wholesale biodiesel prices in the US because these are not available in Canada, and they show a moderate price premium over petroleum diesel. So this is for the biodiesel. In 2018, the City of Toronto, for B5, the cost was the same as petroleum diesel. If they were to purchase B10 or B20, it would be about 3 cents per liter or 6 cents per liter, respectively, increase relative to petroleum diesel to move to those higher level blends. Based on available information, and there is less information on HDRD, as I mentioned, it's not currently produced in Canada, and there is some imported into Canada, but the price premium would likely be double the premium for biodiesel at the same blend level. We did some greenhouse gas emissions modeling based on the model used in the Ontario Greener Diesel regulation and using default assumptions generally within the model. And these were the modeling of the carbon intensity or greenhouse gas intensity values. Typical life cycle greenhouse gas emissions reductions for B5 to B20 would be about 3 to 20% relative to petroleum diesel, and 3.5 to 16% for B10 or B20 relative to B5, depending on the feedstock used. We looked at an example scenario where we would look at B5 in the winter, B10 in the spring and fall, and B20 in the summer. Greenhouse gas emissions reductions would be 8 to 12% relative to petroleum diesel and 4 to 7% relative to B5 that's currently used, and this again would depend on the feedstock used. Estimated reductions were 30 to 40,000 tons CO2 equivalent per year relative to petroleum diesel and 15 to 25 relative to B5. With HDRD, it has slightly higher greenhouse gas emissions than biodiesel, and therefore there would be slightly lesser reductions at any given blend level. Looking at air quality impacts, we did not model air quality impacts. We reviewed the literature. We found that air quality was likely to improve with the use of biodiesel or HDRD. There are higher levels of benefits, more benefits in older vehicles that have lesser emissions control technologies. There would also be greater benefits at higher blend levels. Generally has lower emissions of particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and hydrocarbons, all typical air pollutants. Results for nitrogen oxides were slightly less consistent for biodiesel, but would depend on feedstock, engine, and emissions control technology. None of the studies examined the biodiesel, that is the stringently controlled biodiesel under CGSB. Our final recommendations were that bio-based diesel was expected to result in net benefits for air quality and greenhouse gas emissions for the city. From a technical standpoint, the city should be able to use B5 in the winter, higher blends such as B10 in spring or fall, B20 in the summer. The potential exception is that depending on the fuel turnover, we would recommend lower level blends used in gensets. The expected annual premium would be about $3 million per year for the annual blend scenario. So that was the one above with B5, B10, and B20. The fuel should be specified as being delivered as a blended fuel. And the city should specify that the biodiesel meet the appropriate CGSB standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the presenters?
Thank you.
Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my first are technical, and then later I have some questions for staff. So the pilot project, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So really there's 4 fuels you're testing, so B5, B10, B20, and HDRD. Is that tested as its own, or does HDRD also have
HDRD
blends?
could also be blended.
Okay, so there's like 6 then? Or did you, like what HDRD did you look at?
The HDRD could be used, it's chemically equivalent to petroleum diesel, so it could be used at any blend level. We did look mainly at a 5%, 10%, or 20%.
Okay, so there was like 6 fuels tested then total with the 2 types?
Modeled in our modeling and
In the modeling.
Yes.
And only because I accept that part of this job is trade-offs, and so this is great for air quality, but are there any differences in solubility of them, and do they have any differences on, when blended into fuel on, for example, how big a plume could get because it makes other things more mobile? Like, is that also any sort of consideration for blending?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part, sorry.
Is that a consideration for blending? Like, how does this impact solubility of other things within the diesel?
In the depot.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn, sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm going to turn that over to Stu. Order.
So as a blended fuel, that there are no issues in terms of solubility or if the question is coming from will things come out of solution or that sort of thing, the answer is no. Once blended, they'll stay fully soluble and there's no issues in that regard if that's where you're.
So my question was, if you spell B5 versus B20 in an equivalent system, are the plumes the same, or will one travel far because the biodiesel has a different overall solubility?
Well, so are you asking, so if it gets spilled into water?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, okay. So, I mean, biodiesel is biodegradable, and so if it's a higher blend, it will biodegrade more quickly, if that was kind of where you were going.
Okay, so it could actually be better for water quality as well as air quality by going with a blended fuel?
I guess so, and the
Okay.
hope is that you don't have those, but in the event that they do occur, I guess, yes.
All right, I mean, we go with petroleum-based fuels because they have high BTU, we can transport them over long distances, and unfortunately that means they spill, right? So just because we're switching to biodiesel doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to have leaking underground storage tanks or spills along the transportation routes and stuff like that. Okay, and then in terms of the two sources, the HDRD and the biodiesel, what are the differences on agricultural impacts as well between those two? Because are they all using the same amount of cropland, for example, and all those associated impacts?
So some of the feedstocks were agricultural feedstocks. The other ones that we looked at were the used cooking oil and the animal waste. So obviously the used cooking oil and the animal waste, it's more that we tracked the emissions associated with their collection and any types of pretreatments that had to be done in the processing. From the agricultural point of view, the two feedstocks we looked at were the soybean and the canola. And so the canola is typically grown in Western Canada. It can be used to produce, both of these feedstocks can be used to produce either the HDRD or the biodiesel. The yield tends to be slightly higher for the biodiesel than the HDRD per unit of feedstock.
Okay.
And there are some lesser inputs associated with the biodiesel. The canola has lower greenhouse gas emissions than the biodiesel because it is reported to sequester soil carbon, which results in lowering its emissions. And it also has a higher oilseed content of the canola, around 40% compared to 19% of the soybean. And so the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the soybean-produced biodiesel or HDRD are higher because of the agricultural impacts compared to the canola.
And then the last question was, where was the supply for both sets of fuels, for the HDRD and the biofuels? Where did you obtain those for this testing?
So we used generally assumptions within the GH-Genius model, which is prescribed under the greener diesel regulation for modeling. So we did not model specific producers of the fuel. The assumption would be that the canola was produced in Western Canada, that the soybean would be produced in the Ontario region. There is also biodiesel and HDRD imported into Canada that would be produced from feedstocks produced outside of Canada. And so biodiesel is currently produced in Canada. It's also imported and exported from Canada. And so the exact greenhouse gas emissions intensity and exact practices that would be used would be determined based on what would be reported to the city. For example, for greenhouse gas emissions intensity, the supplier to the city would be required to report their specific greenhouse gas intensity and their specific assumptions associated with that.
So we will need to consider where we're getting the fuels as well if we're, for the transportation and the fossil fuels that would be associated with that as well, right? So if we can get it locally, it's better.
The transportation-related emissions are not that high for these types of fuels. So it's more important that you're growing them in an area where you have appropriate growing conditions. Those are some of the key factors. Also, you would have variability in your petroleum-based emissions. The greener diesel regulation puts one value on greenhouse gas emissions associated with petroleum-derived fuels, but there would be a range of those as well. So there would always be some variability associated with any of these pathways. The main point, though, is that there are very substantial greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So even if you were to have a slightly less efficient production process, the reductions are quite substantial with any of the options.
So we're over. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for the presenters?
Yes.
Councillor Layton?
Thank you very much. So just to go through the checklist here, there were some concerns that some folks had about the movement towards higher content in biodiesel. So the issue around the infrastructure changes. with what you're proposing here, the 5 going to 5, 10, and 20. Let's call it the 5, 10, 20 model.
Right.
5, 10, 20 model, there's no infrastructure changes required. There's no vehicle maintenance issues that you predict. Most of the vehicles are in fact under warranty up to B20, but you don't predict that there would be an issue with the remainder.
There may be an additional filter change as has occurred during the pilot project as the biodiesel somewhat cleans the engine, and so that is a fairly minimal charge, but may be required a one-time only fee.
And the CGSB standard is the best in the world.
Yes.
The reduction, I'm trying to figure out in my head, so 4% of transportation emissions are a result of city vehicles that you looked at. A proposed move to the 5, 10, 20, you had a number up there, and I tried really quickly doing it in my head about what that would mean about the 4% of transportation emissions. And are those 4% of transportation's piece of the pie, or 4% of the transportation pie?
4% of the transportation pie.
Okay, because transportation's roughly, who am I looking for an answer on this? Where's the environment office? No, Jim's not here. Jim's at the other side. No, it's like a 30%. It's roughly. Do you know what transportation is as a makeup of Toronto's GHG emissions portfolio?
I'll turn that to Daniel.
I think it's around 8 million tons. I would have to double check that.
But it's around, sorry, it's around a third, right?
Yeah, that's, so 8 out of 20, I think, is the number I have in my head.
Pardon me?
8 out of 20, so close to a third, yeah.
So 30%, I'll ask him a question when we ask staff questions. So, okay, so what percentage would the move from 5 to the 5, 10, 20 be as a percentage of our overall GHG emissions as a city, as within the transportation sector, and then within the bigger pie? It's a fraction of a percent, but it's a measurable fraction of a percent. We're not talking 5 zeros after that decimal point, right?
No, if you'll give me a moment, I will do the calculation right now, but keep asking questions while I do that.
Okay, I've got another question about the other jurisdictions.
Okay.
So which of these have gone to the, have moved up to B20? This is on slide 9.
Yes, I have a backup here of which one.
These are pretty much the other major municipalities in Ontario, right?
Right. So in 2015, which was the most recent data we could find available, at that time Brampton had been using B5 and B20. They then stopped using it based on our conversation with Brampton. An authority at Brampton suggested it was related to a price issue that they stopped using it, but they're considering restarting their blending program. The York region, our understanding is that they use B5 year-round and that B20 is used in the summer. What we found was that it was by about 22% of their transit vehicles. Oshawa was found to use B10 blend year-round. Kitchener, Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Mississauga use B5 or B4 blends. And Ottawa was currently using a B4 blend. We did several interviews of municipalities to find this information because we did not find up-to-date statistics.
There's nothing online.
Right, and we had it at one point in 2015 also that, no, I guess that yes, it was just York, Guelph was using some B20 at that time in Brampton, so, but that was what we had.
And when you, so they have opted not to do the 5, 10, 20, but just do a 5 and 20. Right? They don't have an intermediate?
That is our understanding, and then the Oshawa was using B10 year-round.
Okay.
So it may be
B10 year-round?
Yeah. Except their fire trucks.
And did you speak to the staff in Oshawa?
I believe that Stu, did you speak with Oshawa?
It wasn't me, no.
No, okay.
Because I'm just curious, if we're at a 5, 10, 20, why wouldn't we just go for a 10, 20 mix?
Stu, I'll let you speak to the cloud point issue there.
Sure. So you can blend higher blends in the wintertime, so it becomes a cloud point issue. And so there's a slightly different cloud point depending on the feedstock that's used. So the reason they tend to use rendered and use cooking oil for the feedstock in the summer is because it has a warmer cloud point, and soy and canola in the winter. So back to answering your question, because so first of all, with CGSB standards, the same cloud point is required whether it's a B0, a B5, or a B10 or a B20. And so as you get into higher blends, that means the petroleum fuel has to be able to accommodate some of the slight differences in cloud point. And so that's why B5 is easier to blend in winter, and B10 is easier to blend in the shoulder season, spring and fall, because you don't have to do any correction for the cloud point. And then in the summertime, there's a lot of what we would call cloud point giveaway, where you have lots of room.
So cloud point is dependent on two factors, on the feedstock and on the mixture.
So yes, but the petroleum diesel is blended seasonally for cloud point, and it's changed every half month depending on the region. So we included in the report the orbits for the Toronto region, and so it's changing, and so the petroleum diesel is made for what's expected to be delivered, and so we've calculated that for the B5 in the winter, you wouldn't have any need to correct for cloud point, for example. And the same for the B10 in the short.
Councillor Layton, you're well over 6 minutes.
I had just an answer to the earlier question.
Yeah, so it's about 1/3 to 0.5% of the city's transportation emissions.
A third. So we have an opportunity.
I was dropped a hint that we're closing in on 7 minutes.
I had waited to get an answer on a question about halfway through, Councillor. I can't get an answer to that one question, but I had already asked the question. I don't see how. On a point of order, this is the 5th time this item has come back. Councillor, you haven't appeared any of the times I've been on the committee.
Okay, no crosstalk.
All 5 times.
Councillor Layton, you know the limit is 5 minutes.
But
if we let everyone go to 7 minutes.
I had previously asked a question, and I was just looking to get the answer. I don't see why it has to be this much of a hostile debate.
Well, I wouldn't call that hostility.
Then perhaps I just spend the next.
No, there is no hostility from the deputy mayor.
I was simply getting an answer.
I would simply say we have another round. We're going to be asking questions of staff. Maybe they'll be able to fill in the gaps you're looking.
We have the expert that we just paid a report for from the University of Toronto, and I can't get the answer to the question that I asked.
If they can't answer it, would you like to sit here?
They just needed a minute.
Would you like to sit here all day for a question they can't answer?
They just said he could.
You just finished saying they're not answering your question?
No, he just was giving the answer. He was just giving the answer, Councillor.
Can we give the answer in 20 seconds, 30 seconds?
1/3 to 0.5%.
That's all he was trying to say when the councillor interrupted.
Then Councillor Layton, you shouldn't have asked it at the top end of your
I did answer it at the top end of the questions, and then he asked for a moment to calculate it.
Right, but understood. But if we let everyone just go all day, we're never going to get any business done.
I'm going to spend my next 5 minutes on every item, on every person, asking every question I possibly can.
Mr. Chair, just on a point of order, we do know that there are lots of opportunities to ask questions. There's now. We could ask them before this, anytime when this report was published, and there's during this meeting while there's another item going on, or there are future opportunities. I'm more interested in making sure that the meeting runs efficiently and everyone gets a fair turn. I'm less interested in theater.
Okay, fair enough.
On a point of order, we have a deputant here that I don't have the opportunity to sequester or email in the hallway to give me an answer. It was a very simple question. I was just trying to get a 10-second answer, and you've made it a big thing.
I haven't made it a big thing. You have. Look at you. You're going off.
Councillor Layton, you've got your answer.
I am simply asking for an answer and some courtesy from a councillor.
Deputy Mayor.
More theater.
Councillor Layton, you have the answer, right? Yes. Can we move on?
We can, but I would
just
ask that the insults that are coming from the deputy mayor stop. You ask him to stop making these editorialized comments.
I'm suggesting to everyone we move on. Thank you. Any other questions for the presenters? Questions for city staff? Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the report, it says that in 2013, 41% of greenhouse gas emissions were from transportation. What is that now, 5 years later?
The number for transportation is about 30%.
Okay. And have we looked at building partnerships about this biodiesel issue, and have we looked at what's being done internationally? And so the example that comes to mind is Eni, the Italian oil and gas company, has a partnership with the city of Turin and with Polytechnic University in Turin. And I'm just wondering, like, what have we done to look at how we can accelerate implementing a biodiesel program in the city of Toronto?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we haven't looked at partnerships. That's actually the first time that's been mentioned. At this point, what we wanted to do was assess the potential GHG impacts and financial impacts with looking at various percentages of biodiesel use. So it's certainly something we could consider.
So now that this report is, I mean, in my opinion, showing this is a good idea and we should move forward on this, what are the next steps? Like, how do we make this a reality and roll this out, firstly in TTC, but then also to all the other vehicles that we have in the city of Toronto that are on diesel?
Through the chair, so the next step, currently we're in process of developing the citywide fuel RFP. That will go out this year, and we will report back later this year with the results of that RFP and the cost implications associated with the various recommendations. So that report will go back to GGLC committee.
And if I want to know what other partnerships are having and how those might be able to be, how we can learn from that and bring that to the city of Toronto, what would be the avenues available to me and to us to do that?
Through the chair, I mean, obviously a request to report back. We could certainly report back on that and explore those avenues.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Deputy Mayor Menon-Wong.
Thank you. Where does this situate in terms of biofuel versus electric vehicles within the context of there exists vehicles, garbage trucks that are electric, as an example. If we make a choice to go fully biodiesel, we're making a 7-year commitment. So have you done any analysis both in terms of which is the more, from an environmental standpoint, which is the better vehicle? And have you also done a business case analysis of what the cost of running all, not just garbage trucks, but the entire fleet on electric versus biodiesel, what the cost is over the life of the vehicle when you factor in both the cost of maintenance, purchase, and the fuel itself?
Through the chair, so what you reference is exactly how we approach this when looking at things such as total life cycle cost, fuel availability, whether that's for electric vehicles, biodiesel, compressed natural gas, and so forth. So we have looked at that. The refuse fleet is looking more towards compressed natural gas options. We look at electric where it's available, and the marketplace continues to change every year where there's options increasingly available in that area, as well as biodiesel. So for the foreseeable future, some of the fleet will continue to use diesel. So for solutions to look at that, this is one option for consideration.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so you said you've looked at that. Where's the analysis?
Through the chair, looked at which?
You said you've looked at the business case of the total life cycle costs. I suspect you looked at conventional versus which would be diesel or gasoline, biodiesel, I'm assuming, and electric. You said you've looked at that. I think I got that correct, and you've done you have the analysis. I'm just curious to know, because when we kind of make these choices, we're locking in for quite a long time, and while one technology might not be there, one assumes that in like 5 years it will be there. I'm just wondering where that analysis, can we see that analysis?
Through the chair, yeah, you were correct, you did get that. So as part of our purchase decisions that happen every year, we review those options to see what options are available in this case, what may make sense, and so forth.
Have you ever thought about reporting to this committee Because if we make a decision here, it's in the absence of doing that comparative analysis. I mean, Mr. Chair, we only have a report for information, but if, I mean, I'm not saying this isn't, it's probably a better option than what we have now, but there are other options on the table, and before we kind of decide on a path, I think that analysis would be useful. And have you ever considered reporting through this committee on, you know, showing us both the environmental analysis and the financial analysis?
Through the chair, and on a more high level, what we've done is reported back in the citywide green fleet plan on the various options that we consider. It doesn't have the fine level detail in that, but we, if there was a request for a certain requirement, we could certainly do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. So if I'm clear on the report, the GHG reductions are significant if we move to a 5-10-20 model?
Through the chair, as stated in the presentation, 15 to 25,000 tons over the current B5 that we are using.
And that we won't have to do any major infrastructure changes as a result?
Through the chair, that's correct.
That vehicle maintenance, except for perhaps in some older vehicles and upgrading of a filter slightly more often, we shouldn't expect any additional strain on our infrastructure, on our vehicles?
Through the chair, yeah, older vehicles are just the vehicles in general. The first ones flowing through the solvent properties through the tanks and so forth, there would be a filter change typically associated.
Can I, so I was under the impression we were entering into a new going through an RFP to enter into a new contract for Jan 1, 2019. Is that still the case or no?
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
But, so we entered into a new contract as of last month or 2 months ago?
Nope, so through the chair, I touched on it earlier, is we are developing an RFP right now that will be released, closed, and awarded this year that will form the basis for that new contract as of January 1, 2020 onward for the next 5 years.
And will the 5-10-20 requirement be built in to that?
Through the chair, yeah, there'll be various percentages, maybe not even just that. We'll look at a wider range of percentages.
So how can we ensure, because it's been now 2 years since we kicked this around and we had a big confrontation in the last round. I just want to make sure it's clear that the intent of council is to move to the recommended 5-10-20 model in this RFP. Is that, will that be the kind of baseline for where the RFP is?
Through the chair, as I mentioned, this is one part of it, so we have the recommendations on what is viable. The next piece is through that tender is the cost implications associated with those recommendations, which as part of concurrent with that tender award will go back to General Government and Licensing Committee.
So how will we ensure that the bidders that are coming in are giving us a bid cost of a 5-10-20 model?
Those specifics will be included in the RFP that will be released later this year.
Sorry, so the specifics of this is what we want to achieve, the 5-10-20 will be included?
Yeah, as well as other requirements, without getting too far into what will be in the RFP.
I suspect there's a whole lot of other stuff baked into that RFP, but the 5-10-20, I just want to make sure the biodiesel element, the moving to this higher standard will be included.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Again, just to clarify, there will be the cost implications that we'll report back to GGLC, and there's funding associated with that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I might be ready. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very, whoa, this has been a long, long journey on this item. I think it was last year where there was a whole, I was trying to find other fuel metaphors, but I couldn't really, none came to mind. But it flared up last year between Fleet and councillors on the Environment and Parks Committee at that time, and Parks and Environment Committee, I should say. in that we didn't think staff were moving fast enough because there were they had outlined some concerns, and it didn't appear like there were some lobbyists saying that those concerns were invalid. There were the university saying you really should look at this. Staff were a little apprehensive about the move. But I'm glad that pretty much as of today, we've gotten those concerns addressed, in that now we know, while we don't know the exact cost, is that a move to B5, 10, 20 won't break the bank. It's cost effective. If we look at our larger, the amount of greenhouse gases that it reduces. The CGSB standard is the most stringent in the world, and therefore we can't expect to have any vehicle maintenance issues, and there are no infrastructure changes required as a result of this. And while I hope I'm not reading too much into where Councillor Min Wong's motion will go, I'd agree. It'd be great to see us move to even a different, less impactful fuel source. I don't think that's possible in the shorter term, and given the fact that the investment is actually quite small, and I don't think the RFP would preclude us from moving onto yet undiscovered fuel sources or an increasing the investment in the infrastructure to support electric cars. I think that this is a good step forward. If I got the number correctly, 4% of the city's transportation transportation emissions in the city are a result of city vehicles, particularly these diesel city vehicles, and that this would reduce a third to a half. I think my numbers may be off there of the total piece, but the reality is it's a measurable decrease in our GHG emissions. And if we're to achieve what the new city target is, which is 100% reduction from because now that we're linked to the IPCC, it's 100% reduction by 2050 compared to 1992 numbers. If we can even get a fraction of a percent down with a decision like this, it's worth making. Because it gets us that much closer, and it means that Mr. Baxter over there can actually start changing his chart to start reflecting some of the moves that we've been making here. There are other municipalities on the list that are doing better than we are and have been for a couple years. There's others that aren't doing that well. And this is one of those instances where Toronto can lead by example, because it was incredibly difficult to find any information about what other municipalities were doing about their fuel mix. I feel for the researchers, because I spent a couple hours trying to do it in advance of a meeting a year ago, and it was incredibly difficult to even find out what they were doing in the northern US states, where there's these grand announcements about moving to B20 and not actually a move there. One thing, and I forgot to mention, I thought about this on my ride in today, was what could we do, what advocacy could we do provincially about switching not only our own fuel sources to B5, 10, 20, but to get the province to actually start mandating that and saying they've got to move the yardsticks for all diesel vehicles on the road, because that would mean that we wouldn't be at a cost disadvantage at all if we had if we did that move and the province followed suit. So I'm hopeful that perhaps if this does go to council, that we can have that discussion. If not, I'm sure I'll find a way of getting that recommendation in during the Transform TO discussions. But thank you, staff, for being patient with the former chair and myself. We will be looking at this RFP once it comes out. So I really hope that the 5, 10, 20 mix comes in and we're able to move ahead. That's it from me.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor?
I have a motion. I actually have a question. It's no, it's a point of order. It's a point of order for the motion. No, that's a good point. I mean, I'm a rule follower, so I appreciate the Councillor Layton's enthusiastic interjection. I'll put my motion up and then I'll ask my question. So that the General Manager of Fleet Services be requested to provide a report on the life cycle cost environment impacts of gas, electric, and diesel vehicles needed by city divisions. It's not graceful, but I think I got my point across. My question is that a report to government, the Government Management Committee, or whatever they call it, or is that a report back here, or is it because it hits two departments, does it go to Executive Committee? No, I guess it's a question of the clerk's office, or, you know, someone.
So, through you, Mr. Speaker, yeah, I think where we've settled is, depending on what the quantum of the report is focused on, if it's primarily focused on the environmental side, then I would suggest it would come here. If it's primarily focused on other aspects on the financial side, it may fall under general government. So I think at this point, maybe the best thing would be is the ask can either and have it referred or returned to the appropriate standing committee, and we'll have to work through that.
I mean, my view, Madam Chair, if I may, just to the Deputy City Manager, my view is that the life cycle costs is equally weighted with the environmental impacts. So in that event, would it report through an executive committee because it touches two standing committees? That's usually the process.
So through you, Madam Speaker, typically, yes, where we've got multiple mandates across the committees. My recommendation would be to be referred to the appropriate standing committee, and then let us sort through with the clerk's office what makes the most sense. It looks like it could be split. The focus looks primarily on environmental impact, but I think at this point, we'd suggest appropriate standing committee instead of everything defaulting to exec. And then we'll sort out from there where it most appropriately goes.
Okay, I'll just briefly speak. I don't pretend to be an expert on this diesel fuel arrangement, but I have gone through a discussion at the TTC about our fleet, and we're looking forward. We've just bought a bunch of electric buses. We only dipped our toe because, you know, you don't want to choose a bad technology. But I do know the future is electric. There's no question about that for me. And I do know there has been a study out of Columbia University that shows the business case and also the environmental case. And I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to go too far along in the diesel piece. Former Councillor de Bearmaker was very aggressive about this at the TTC and didn't want to actually buy as many hybrid diesel buses because he thought that we were 10 years from now, because we were making a 10-year decision that 5 years in, or 6 or 7 years, we'd be stuck with these belching diesel buses that make a lot of noise. So I just, it's more of a caution that it sounds like a great idea, but you don't really want to, attach yourself to something that 5 years from now you're kind of stuck with because you've already bought these assets that you can't get rid of, and so you're stuck with 5 years from now there'll be some if electric's like or some other fuel. They're even talking about fuel cells and things like that. You don't want to be stuck in a place where you kind of put all your chips on one number, and you got no flexibility to move around. So that's the purpose of that motion. So.
Just a question of the mover, and this is just, would you consider a friendly amendment to include compressed natural gas in your list of fuels or vehicle types? We actually have some compressed natural gas vehicles in our waste fleet that the gas is a renewable natural gas. So it would just be, would you consider just adding compressed natural gas to that list of fuel? It was requested by city staff, so.
Oh, yeah, of course. No problem. I think we should be. I think we should be looking at everything.
Great.
Any additional questions for the mover? Councillor Cole, speak.
Yes, the compressed natural gas addition caught my attention. I was there in the day when we were told at the TTC that the next best thing that was going to save the TTC was compressed natural gas.
Yep.
At that time, Howard Moscow and I were on the commission. We thought that the electric trolley system was worth saving. And they told us, well, you're old-fashioned, electricity and the trolleys are a thing of the past. The new thing everybody is going to is compression. So the TTC management at the time decided to build these compressed natural gas stations, filling stations. I remember one at Wilson, and they didn't tell us till after the fact, but that one blew up. And they kept that secret from the rest of us because they were hustling this compressed natural gas system as the savior of the TTC. So I totally agree with the councillor's motion to look at all systems. The only thing is I do not agree with looking at compressed natural gas, considering the horrific history we've had and the millions of dollars wasted on that failed effort, which is extremely dangerous and not efficient. And I got a sensitivity to compressed natural gas for that reason. So I'm just giving the background to it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really think the City of Toronto needs to be a leader in this field, and if we can move towards biofuels, it shows others that it can be done. We're reaching the end of oil. The end of oil is here, right? You don't just dig a well and turn on the tap and the oil flows out, right? We're moving towards fracking. We're moving towards, increased processing of oil sands because we are reaching that point where it's becoming more and more difficult to get fossil fuels out of the earth. So if the City of Toronto can start to move towards biofuels, it shows others that it can be done. It shows leadership. And I also think that we're falling behind the rest of the world. And in particular, we're falling behind what they're doing in Europe, where I think they are considerably more advanced at using biofuels and incorporating that technology, but also into developing partnerships with the oil and gas industry, because the oil and gas industry is realizing that they are getting near the end of oil and that they need to innovate and they need to move forward also. So I really feel that if we want to accelerate this program going forward, we need to be looking at building those partnerships with the oil and gas industry, and we need to look at working together so that we can shift off of fossil fuels and onto biofuels. So I'm really excited to see this report here, and I'm really thankful to the smart researchers at the University of Toronto that came in to provide advice and guidance to us on this matter, and hopefully we can make this a reality very soon in the city.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Any other speakers? No? There is a motion. It's on the screen. Any questions for the mover? No? Okay, already done. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The item is amended. All those in favor? It's carried. Right. Item number 3, contract awards for local resurfacing program. Hamish Wilson.
Good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you for coming.
Choices. What to do? With these road contracts, which are almost certainly needed, it does have a feel of randomness about it, about, what gets done here, what gets done there. It seems very uneven, not that I know what the conditions are. And it's only the local roads, not some of the larger roads, not some of the laneways, not the patching. And I'm not sure that we're actually getting into a systemic review of the pavement that we have, which relates to the drainage as well, and the overload of the thermal heat, the heat island. Yes, a rougher road is helpful for traffic calming. I'm not sure if that's part of the Vision Zero or not, just to let, you know, a rough road does tend to slow people down. That's why the bridle path, I don't think has been, the north bridle path has necessarily been replaced that often. But if we've made choices to have an austerity budget, which we seem to be doing or have done by limiting our income, in not raising taxes and not having a vehicle registration tax, I think we're only going to make all our roads worse. We should be doing a lot more road repaving and not just mere pothole filling, because my sense is, not that I know most of the area of the city, the road system is really in decline. Once it gets to a certain point, the tipping point, like climate, it just gets a negative synergy and goes down, in part because you have the freeze-thaw cycles that are accentuated by climate and the winter. We had a cold winter. When you have leaky pavement that doesn't shed water, the water gets in, and you should know this, of course, but as the water freezes, it expands. And so snap, crackle, pop, there go the roads. And it's not safe for cyclists. It's bad for the car drivers too. You may want to actually monitor just how many more claims you get. But with cyclists, I think you have to make sure that your standards are not whether or not a car can drive over it, but whether or not it's safe for cycling, please. We're supposed to be actually riding in the gutter off to the right of the road, but it's often really unsafe for us and uncomfortable. When you have a pond that you're supposed to go through, you don't know how big the crater is underneath it, or whether or not you have a crevice that will grab your tire and tip you over. So it's an awkward thing to actually take more of the lane and be out in front of the car drivers. They don't like it sometimes. So, you know, yes, you have to spend money on the roads. I just think that the other thing that we need to be doing is making sure that we spend enough money in adequate ways. So that gets back to the big spends that we have and the choices that are being made about a massive subway extension and also the Gardiner. Big spends. Sometimes I will say they have limited benefit versus the broader benefit of making sure that we have a good road system throughout the city. As I'm sure you're probably aware, the Sunday Star had a good set of info about Scarborough's subway cost estimates far higher than council told. If we get a lot pregnant with this suspect subway extension, where's all the money going to be coming from? The hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to be needed if we do this thing probably should be applied much more to a road system. So don't do just patching, please. Do this. But do much more. Raise your income. Also avoid the major spends. The other thing is the local roads don't necessarily respond to the issues of where we get hurt as a cyclist. Now, these are focused on the downtown core. Yes, it's true. But that's where a lot of us ride, and if we actually want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and have effective transit, we've got to think of having a good system of safe cycling with smooth roads. And so within these programs, I really think we have to focus on bikeway relief. So notice of hazard about Bloor Street West. Notice of hazard about Bloor Street West, the pavement especially in front of, that's west from Shaw over to Dundas West. Notice of hazard about the pavement in front of the Royal Conservatory. It's far rougher than Lower Brunswick Avenue, which is finally getting repaved in this contract. Great, but actually North Brunswick, north of Bloor, is really rough as well. Lots to do.
You're at 5 minutes. If you could wrap up, please.
Yep. You have to think of actually really being strategic about your road repairs, including subway relief, transit relief.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Cole.
Hamish, perhaps you can shed some light on this. And you were talking about the very rough condition of the roads and the dangers posed by it and the ponding and the potholes, etc. I know with it, our roads department, transportation department is constantly trying to deal with road the rebuilding of roads, patching, resurfacing, et cetera, as this report states. Have you run across, in your comparison of strategies in dealing with road and road repair, resurfacing, a better approach to dealing with, I'm not talking about doing complete road resurfacing or rebuilding, but of, it seems that for the last 50 years, no matter what we do to patch potholes, we can't seem to figure this out. They patch, they fill, ice, thaw, salt, there's tar and all over the roads again. Is there a jurisdiction in this universe that's figured out how to deal with the pothole epidemic that you've read across, maybe in some other European jurisdiction or somewhere?
It's really complicated, sir. You're bang on in saying that it's like we try and we put lots of money into it. I think the quality of asphalt is one thing. There was one issue that we had was the Harper government, I believe, let the cable companies just have complete access to whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. So the core roads, maybe more than other parts of the city, were really dug up. And every time you sort of dig things up, you have more settling, and the settling means that the water gets in, and it takes money. And you also have and that's what do we spend it on? Do we charge the motorists a vehicle registration fee or a toll to come in? The trucks are the pressure of the pavement on their tires on the pavement makes it a lot worse as well. So I think you're correct in looking for solutions over in Europe. There was something that I caught in a book on biking. I can't remember the title, sort of Bike to Reclaim the City, basically a bike book. The Danish Ministry of Transport found that having people bike saved them 90 cents a kilometer, basically, over cars. So that means better transit, it means better biking, and also making sure that your city is well funded and what are their priorities. So having external European advice on our transport and some of our transit plans might be a really good use of money so we can squeeze the billions. Because if we're spending billions, with respect, we have to spend a lot of money out in Scarborough. But Scarborough subway extension is not good value for the money. If we're talking about a business case, business cases, what's the business case for Scarborough? What's the business case for wrecking our roads by not maintaining them well?
Councillor Cole, did you get your question answered in between the diatribes?
No, I appreciate the perspective and the input, and perhaps this committee might take that advice and look to other jurisdictions for dealing with the pothole epidemic, which is the scourge of the city of Toronto, and we don't seem to have an answer. And I should editorialize a bit, and I'm also upset with the CAA. They're great at, they're a money-making corporation. They're great at criticizing, the worst roads in Barrie, Toronto, yet they never offer any solutions. They say, this road's bad. Yeah. So what's the solution? Maybe they should also help. If they're, a big insurance company, they have huge resources, they could help find some solutions. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other questions for the deputant? Questions for staff?
No, because now you got the computer that tells you where to go. You don't need the
GPS, Councillor Perusa. Councillor McKelvey.
First, I just want a clarification. We're on 3.3 since we were talking about the Scarborough subway in that last deputation. We're still on 3.3?
We are. I'm not sure what this has to do with the Scarborough subway, but if you'd like to take 15 seconds and clarify,
So we're dealing with item 3.3 here, right?
Yes, not the Scarborough subway.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, so now I can ask my question. My question is about, how is this contract managed? How are we going to ensure we're on schedule, on budget this year? And then also, what can be done to facilitate accelerating this process next year?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Perusa.
A big word.
I didn't.
72.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Perusa. I didn't know you were on city staff.
Half of those.
I want half the action here.
Yeah, this was a great idea to put it ward by ward, wasn't it? Thank you,
Scarborough gets everything.
thank you, Councillor Perissa.
Ward 21. 21's not getting anything done.
Jeez, don't tell him, don't tell him.
Okay, well, yeah, no, as I said, this is a great idea to put it ward by ward. The great ward of Ward 6 is getting 2 streets done. Councillor McKelvey.
Can I get my question answered?
Yes, Councillor McKelvey.
All right, through the chair, the program, when it's also done, it's
Wow,
a fairly routine program that we undertake. It's quite extensive from the standpoint that we're repaving just shy of 200 streets this year, so it's an expansion to what we did last year. The program was handed over to us, to Engineering Construction Services from Transportation, as a result of an auditor general audit back in 2016. So we began in earnest with a comprehensive program in 2017. So this is our 3rd year. In terms of project management, we have in-house expertise that develop the tenders, they plan the program, project managers. We also have to augment the staff complement. We've also hired an engineering consultant who is actually providing field inspection services. And then, so that's the engineering consultant. So we have 2 contracts. We have 2 dedicated teams to oversee the work of the 2 contractors. Contracts have been split basically to the west and east of Leslie/Coxwell, so west and east, so those 2 geographic areas. So we're quite confident. The program, we've got a bit of a kickstart this year, 2 months ahead of schedule to where we were last year. We were quite delayed last year. And so we're quite confident we'll get the work completed. In terms of this program, we routinely bring this program in, all in at or less than the actual contract value. So we're quite confident that this program will carry out in the way that we have in the past years.
And can you just clarify, like, how many years out are you predicting what streets need to get done? Like, when are these lists developed?
Well, I'll punt this off to our colleagues in transportation, but typically the capital coordination for all the works begin 5 years out, but I'll turn it over to transportation for more details.
So through the chair, what Michael said is correct. So the program starts to be developed about 5 years out through our capital coordination process, and then is firmed up about 3 years out.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Minawong.
Through the chair, typically it's based on condition assessment, but the typical resurfacing cycle is 15 to 20 years. It's typically 2 resurfacing cycles, and the 3rd one is a full-out reconstruction with a replacement of...
The reconstruction is after how many years?
Well, 50 to 75 years, and again, it's based on condition.
And based on that arrangement, that let's take the outward for 20 years, how many roads in the city and or kilometers are we behind?
So through the chair, you'll recall there was some discussion through the budget process of the state of good repair backlog. So in 2017, for the first time, we did a fully automated assessment of all of the roads within the City of Toronto. So that was a laser scan and then ground penetrating radar of all of the roads. So for the first...
you went to every single road in the city?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's an ongoing program, so that's repeated every year. So for the major roads and the arterial roads, we do 50% of the network every year, and then for the more minor roads, we do 25% every year. So for the first time ever, we've got a really good understanding of our state of good repair. You'll recall through the budget process that we said that around about 43% of our major roads are in a very poor condition, and around 24% of our local roads are in a very poor condition. So we've got a big backlog of around about $1.5 billion.
How many roads is that?
How many roads? So we've got 5,600 kilometers of road.
Yeah, and how many kilometers of local road are in the backlog?
So there's 3,300 kilometers of local roads. So it would be 25% of that are in a poor condition.
25% of, that's like about 800 kilometers?
No, that would be 50%. So
Very much?
that's
Is that right?
about
Lou?
about 700-800 kilometers.
800 kilometers. How many kilometers are we doing this year for local roads?
So it's about 196 segments, so it will be, it's generally about 115 kilometres.
115. What's that a percentage, what percentage of the backlog of local roads are we doing this year? Wow, it all of a sudden got really quiet.
13%, 14%.
Is that 15%? Is that what we're doing, 15%?
Yeah, around about 15%.
So of local roads.
But I mean, the key point is, as you're alluding to, that the network is getting in worse condition each year.
I guess, so it would be true to say, isn't it, the key point would be that 85% of our local roads that need to get resurfaced aren't getting done this year?
That would be one way of looking at it, yes.
And arterial roads, if you were to do the same math?
Arterial roads would probably be probably a greater proportion that wouldn't be getting done.
Greater than 85%? Wow.
So and that's and
Okay,
that's,
so let's get a little bit more specific and granular about this. And I don't mean this to be specific to any ward, but one ward is getting one road done, another ward is getting 40 roads done, and within the context of, 85% of the local roads not being done, how is it that you came up with a balance that one part of this city gets 40 roads and another part of this, another community only gets one road?
So through the chair, it's based on the condition of the road network. So as I've said, it takes around, 5 years ago, the condition of the road network set the program. We refined that 3 years ago. So this is the road condition of the network 3 years ago. So these are the roads which are coming forward now. So it was all based on visual inspection of the road condition at that point in time.
So how many years ago? You based on what?
And then, sorry, in terms of efficiencies of delivery, then there's clusters. And different areas of the city, the roads were constructed in a different way and at different times as the city built out. So it's not unusual to see clustering of work because of when specific subdivisions were constructed.
So you're saying, for example, the one road's my area. You only gave me one road. And so you're saying that pretty much my roads are in pretty good shape compared to other areas of the city that are like in a lot worse shape?
Well,
because I can, like, if I can show you some roads in my area, and I'm not doing this, well, partly I'm doing it because I'm the local councillor of the area, but the other reason it seems remarkable that there's such a disparity from one community to another community that you're going to do one versus 40.
So through the chair,
Deputy Mayor Minawong, you are at 5.5 minutes.
Yep.
We could go to a second round because this is a very important issue, if you wish. Councillor Perusa.
I just want to ask a couple of questions about asphalt, because I just want to better understand asphalt. So a typical road's resurfacing, sort of you scrape off the old asphalt and you lay down some new. Typically, how much asphalt do you lay down, new asphalt? 2-3 inches?
Through the chair.
So 1.25 inches, and you get 1.25 inches of new asphalt, basically.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. So 1.25 inches of new asphalt. Because I'm just, in terms of the actual quality, I notice here that the two contracts, I guess, are both going to be awarded to whom? To Krupe, correct? They're the low bidder, no? No?
Is to Krupe and one is to Sanscon.
Okay. But Krupe was the low bidder in both, right? Or no?
Yeah, through the chair, the way that it worked, we basically had The same tender was used to award both contracts, and we basically, as I noted in my earlier comment, we split the city up in half. And the way that the tender was couched was the fact that a contractor could bid for the two projects, for the two contracts, as Krupe did. And the decision was that we would flip a coin to decide which tender would be opened first. So if you were low bid on the first tender that was opened, you were eliminated from bidding, your tender was nullified on the second contract. So hence Krupe successful on the first opening, and then they were not included in the second opening.
Okay. Now, in terms of, quality control, how much do you buy asphalt by the weight or by the meter? How is that asphalt typically bought by these folks, by the contractors?
Through the chair, asphalt or the lane of asphalt on the road is paid by the ton, by weight.
So we pay by the ton, but do they also buy by the ton, I'm assuming? They go to some asphalt producer and say, I want a ton of asphalt. Right?
Through the chair, that is typically correct, yes.
Okay. So in terms of the quality of that asphalt, how often do we go out and independently test the quality? Because as you know, our weather is it's changing. We have a lot more thawing and freezing. When the asphalt is brittle and cracks, it pops. You get lots of potholes. You get lots of broken roads fairly quickly, right?
So through the chair, undertaking or the performance of this contract, the city has a quality assurance program where we hire engineering consultants to do the quality testing of the asphalt, both at the plant as well as when the asphalt is being placed on the road. We undertake quality assessments on the stone as well as on the asphalt cement that's being utilized for the asphalt.
So tell me a little bit about asphalt, because I don't understand asphalt. But so when you test it, for example, I've read that if they used to mix oil with recycled oil into asphalt, not bitumen, no, oil, your motor oil. So they take this oil, they mix it into the asphalt, but the oil has a tendency to make asphalt very brittle, and it breaks up very fast. But because you're buying recycled oil, you're getting oil for almost next to nothing. So you're blending it into the asphalt. The volume, your tonnage of asphalt goes up exponentially, and then it breaks up very fast, right? So in terms of that type of testing, how often and to what level?
With respect to the recycled oil, just to be clear through the chair, the city does not accept recycled oil as far as asphalt cement. The industry, there is a concern throughout the industry about the use of recycled oil, and with various jurisdictions and working groups, we are developing tests to test for recycled oil because it's very difficult to test for. However, beyond that, there are a number of tests that we do for the quality of asphalt cement as well as the quantity of asphalt cement.
Okay, I'd like a second round.
You're 5 minutes.
Okay, sure. But I'd like a second round because I just want to pursue this line of questioning for a sec, because I have some concerns about it.
Is there agreement for a second round?
Yeah.
No. Yes.
No? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Councillor Cole.
Just want to follow up on Councilman Long's line of questioning here. It would be pretty hard for me to explain to my constituents if we're looking at the list of the streets that are done across the city, road segments by ward, and if they see Ward 2, I don't know what they got, about 15, 20. This Ward 25, I can't believe, but in fact, I'm going to do a tour. I'm going to go and visit these wards because I can't believe that they would be, 20 times worse, basically, than my ward. And I invite you to come up to my ward. And we have, because of all the trucks, construction on the Eglinton Crosstown, and all the traffic diverted onto the side streets, we've got asphalt hell there, all up and down every street. So, and then I'm looking at my poor ward here, and it's got about 6 or 7 streets there. And then I see the others with 20, 25. How do I explain that to my people? I just would want to know that.
I think a fair question would be to ask how many kilometers is she getting?
Well, I
Well,
think-
whatever, if that's
I think
part of the explanation,
Councillor Cole, you partially answered your own question. There's no point in repaving the side streets adjacent to Eglinton as long as heavy equipment and trucks are going through there. There's,
Yeah, I think the professional staff would, as much as I welcome his very, very significant input, Mr. Chair, I wonder what
no,
staff
we'll,
would give me as a response to that.
fair enough. Could staff answer the question,
Yeah.
please, since my answer was
No, it's
inadequate.
part of the mix. It's part of the mix.
So through the chair, the prioritisation of the roadways is done based on 2 components. There's obviously the road condition, and as I've explained, that road condition will be based on 3 to 5 years ago, based on visual inspections, where we now have far more detailed information. Our capital coordination, which is aimed at ensuring that all works within the city are coordinated and that works are bundled together to try and minimise disruption to the travelling public. And in terms of efficiencies, so clearly it doesn't make much sense to issue a contract to a contractor to do a short section of resurfacing in this part of the city, then jump over to 10 blocks over, and then do another section, another 10 blocks over. There are efficiencies in bundling pieces of work together within a like-minded area. So that's the basis on which the programme has been developed. That does mean that it's not always the worst pieces of road that get done. We also need to remember this is about the resurfacing programme, so those pieces of road which are in a very bad condition actually need to be reconstructed. Resurfacing isn't the suitable mechanism to address those. This response is to everybody on the committee. I'm more than happy to sit down with each of you and go through the road condition reports that we've got for all of the roads within your wards. I'm happy to come out with staff on any site visits that you would like us to do.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I will be doing that, and welcome. And I want to do a tour of wards 25 and 2 also. And then and I think what Councillor Minnan-Wong pointed out is that so many of our roads need serious reconstruction or repair. So we look at these big, extravagant, rapid transit plans. They're going to spend tens of billions of dollars. I think as council, we need to pay more attention to our potholes and our roads and not to these fancy ribbon-cutting super monorail projects that are being proposed for transit.
We're not on speakers yet. Is that? Was
that was...
Whoopsie.
Oh,
whoopsie, sorry.
No, that was a good preview. Are there any more questions for staff?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're still on our first round. Huh?
Okay, I'll wait for a second.
Just a couple of questions. One, on page 6 of the report, it talks about the increase in cost. This was 16% higher than the pre-tender estimates. And it was attributed to increased traffic control. Was there a policy change? I thought we were actually looking at decreasing the cost of traffic control during road reconstructions by eliminating the requirement for police.
Through the chair, in undertaking the performance of the past contracts, I guess the contract industry has been aware that the city has been enforcing their traffic control within the local roads. In other words, ensuring the safe movement of vehicles as well as pedestrians. And in those areas, we have ensured that there is a robust traffic control program that has to be implemented by the contractor.
So they've really just realized that we're enforcing our contract. So they better actually follow it.
They have been managed by our contract management staff to ensure that is being implemented. And as such, they've realized that there's additional cost to implement.
And the rechanneling and fine grading of the ditches is, again, was it a policy change, or why didn't we estimate the cost to be? what we thought it would be?
We've estimated based, through the chair, we've estimated based on past contract and unit rates. They have, in the performance of past contracts, they have, I guess, replied back that those costs have increased for the performance of those individual items in the contract. Okay. And that's why we were seeing an increase.
And on February 18th, you actually did a coin toss? That was actually built into our, like there was a coin toss done?
Through the chair, that is correct, for the simple reason that we did not want the same contractor to undertake the work right across the whole
Sure.
city.
No, I think your reason to not do that, but it's always fun when you see a coin toss as part of an official process. Just finally, the tender price on page 5, there's three of the companies have asterisks next to their numbers because there was a correction for math. Can you explain whose error was that?
Through you, the chair, the contractor made the error.
In all 3 instances?
That is correct. It's not unusual.
Really? And we'd still accept their error if they can't do the math for their proposal right? That still qualifies as a bid?
It's an adding calculation.
Well, I got to say, I'm glad that we're going with the contractor who didn't make a mistake in their math.
Agreed.
Finally, just how long are these portions of road guaranteed? Because I don't know if like me, I bike down Harvard, and if you drive down Harvard, it was resurfaced in my first term of council, which wasn't too long ago, and it's already like flaking away. And I'm just wondering, like, is a 5, 6 year, 7 year time frame acceptable?
Motor oil in the asphalt.
Too much biking.
Through the chair, typically there is a warranty on our asphalt paving contracts of 2 years. So there's a 2-year warranty in which if there are any deficiencies in the workmanship or in the material, that the contractor is required to rectify those deficiencies.
Why just 2 years? It just seems like I buy a warranty for a refrigerator. I get the extended warranty, which is probably a ripoff. But you get the extended warranty in there, like even the factory warranty is 2 years. Why wouldn't we opt to pay a little bit more to ensure that it lasts more than a term of council?
So through the chair, it's typical industry standard of 2-year warranty.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. I have a couple of questions. We can go to a second round if the committee wishes. Well, obviously, I'm disappointed that there's only 2 streets in Ward 6. Would you delay road construction or road resurfacing should there be major water upgrades scheduled, such as basement flooding mitigation and so forth? Is that considered a reason to delay work on a needed street?
Through the chair, going back to my earlier comment where I said that the coordination, the planning for this work begins about 5 years out from the year of construction. Through the capital coordination effort, the programs identified by Toronto Water, for example, where they've identified needs to replace their undergrounds are shared with transportation, and likewise, transportation will identify streets that need to be repaved with Toronto Water. They'll look at each other's programs, and there are ample opportunities to marry up the needs of transportation with Toronto Water. Separate and apart from these tenders, we also are working on other tenders where there is a coordinated program where we're doing road work as well as undergrounds. So to your point, through the chair, that we are actually doing that as well, but they're separate tenders altogether.
Right. So I just want to point out to my colleagues that there are many more streets that do require resurfacing, but I'm assuming through staff clarify if I'm wrong, that it's delayed because if we resurface it in 2018 and basement flooding work is scheduled for 2019, we have to tear up a newly resurfaced road.
Through the chair, again, on the basement flooding program, the areas where work is through the environmental assessments underway, there's essentially been a pseudo moratorium on doing any work in those streets until such time that we've confirmed which streets will require some underground work. So to that point, yes, that there's been a hold on any significant resurfacing in those areas.
Right, fully understood. Another example, Enbridge Gas is going to be tearing up Bathurst Street. Bathurst Street is in desperate need of resurfacing, but they're going to start digging within the next, I think, 30 or 40 days, a large swath of Bathurst Street, I guess, north of Finch. Would you agree there's no point in resurfacing it, putting it on this list now, if it's just going to be torn up under Enbridge's permissions and contract requirements?
Well, again, through the chair, that's the whole objective of the capital coordination, so that we're in there once when it's all said. And the last thing we want to do is to lay a new road and then only to find whether it's Enbridge or, in the case of water, to replace the undergrounds and then damage the new road. So best case is we marry up the needs together. For the internal projects, as I noted earlier on, typically we will bundle the road work with the undergrounds in Toronto Water as one single construction project. We typically plan so that the utilities get in ahead of our construction work, so that, again, the road surface is replaced at one time.
Last question. We don't just eyeball these streets. We have something called an instrumental vehicle. I don't know whether that's some kind of infrared or X-ray vehicle that takes images and can measure the condition of the road. Do you want to just explain that for a minute? And I'm assuming they have driven these streets.
So through the chair, that's correct. So in 2017, for the first time, we awarded a contract to Fugro Roadwear, who have some proprietary vehicles which essentially drive along the road. They take video as they drive along the road of both the road surface and the surrounding assets along the road. They also have laser scanners which are mounted on the vehicle, so it scans in absolute detail the road surface and the condition of the road surface and the variability in that road surface. It also contains ground penetrating radar as well, so it can scan through underneath the road to check the road composition and the condition of that.
Okay, thank you very much. We can go to a second round if the committee desires. Deputy Mayor Menawong.
Is related to Councillor Cole's inquiries. The Eglinton is the roads are a mess with the construction taking place. So am I assuming the entire length of Eglinton, or at least where it's really bad, that's going to be resurfaced or reconstructed once the project is completed, and who pays for that?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question, Councillor, and it's one of the things which I'm currently in active discussions with Metrolinx over at this point in time.
Seriously, like, we don't know that they're going to fix the mess? We can't recover against them? Like, along Eglinton around Daw Mills Road, it's literally like a roller coaster. You can't, and the roads are in horrible shape. They've done this, and they don't have to fix it?
So through the chair, as with all of these things, it's not black and white. So obviously in areas where they've obviously been working, there is a requirement for them to reinstate the road in an as before condition.
They have an obligation?
Yes, absolutely. Where they've been working. Where it becomes a little grayer is obviously they've had heavy construction vehicles travelling on both portions of Eglinton and on the roads connecting into Eglinton. So there's a broader conversation which we're having with Metrolinx at the moment about how we rectify the condition of those.
So there's an obligation for construction companies that wreck roads to fix them. Is that fair?
Generally through their work zone area, yes, in the areas that they're working, but when you're talking a huge project like this, which is on a much broader scale, then it's far more difficult to quantify the damage which is caused directly by that work and those contractors compared to...
But if it's obvious, we could, claim against them. Is that fair? Can we make a claim against them?
If it's entirely obvious that it's adjacent to their work zone, for example, and there's been road degeneration, then certainly throughout the works they've been going in and fixing those sorts of potholes where they've been identified, and yes, we'll be expecting them to rectify that carriageway when their works are complete.
Okay, secondly, and if you can answer this quickly, because I have a more important question next. Scope of control on these projects, are you satisfied that these projects are being properly monitored? Because the Auditor General, I think, has spilled some ink about we're not actually, examining the roads when they're finished, that they're kind of to the, or we're not like, we ask for an inch, they give us like half an inch. And are you satisfied that we've got enough folks out there monitoring the roads?
Yeah, through the chair, we're satisfied. I get to the earlier answer I provided with respect to that. We've augmented our staff complement with having professional engineering staff out in the field to do the detailed field inspections. I guess one of the things I need to highlight is the fact that each of these tenders, if you were to go through, there's quantity estimates by street, which was something that was amiss in the past tenders. So we know going into a particular street in terms of what the actual quantities are, and they're measured on site before they're inspected. Okay. And as noted, we have a 2-year warranty period to rectify any deficiencies that may exist.
Okay, thanks. So these final questions are what I really want to get to. So we're 85% lacking. We have to resurface 85% of the roads, local roads that we have. I think that was the number that they gave. Arterial roads are worse. And this is probably the Deputy City Manager. Is there a way forward or a plan to get this number down?
So through you, Mr. Speaker, certainly the extent to which we've got a state of good repair backlog, the manner in which we are doing the capital project planning, asset management, et cetera, is a significant piece of focus for this year. I think everybody has come to realize that we need that full suite of what our assets conditions are and set forward a plan to make the improvements necessary. Do we have a plan today beyond that, which has been the past practice? No, but there is a focus at all levels of the senior leadership team to look at the asset management and capital plan. Because we're all significantly
You can't tell me,
concerned.
for example, at the end of this term, for the end of this political cycle, which let's say is 2022, you can't tell me that 85% might creep up to 90%. I'm just asking because if there's no plan, it could get worse.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, certainly that would not be the intention. The intention is for it to go the other direction. But as we are looking at how we are planning, executing, the cash flowing, what is necessary for us to meet an appropriate level of repair on all of our capital assets is absolutely a key focus. I had made that comment as well during the budget process, that how we are doing the coordination and all aspects related to capital is going to be focused on this year. So we should see by the end of this term of council significant improvement and headway on the state of good repair, subject to our ability to execute, our ability for the trades to meet the needs. There's a lot of civil engineering work, engineering and construction work going on in the city, as well as a funding plan to look at how we're going to make sure we've got the money to deal with all the capital assets we have. Okay. Because roads are just one.
Thank you. Do you have the
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. We're on a second round. Any questions for staff? Councillor Peruzza?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the asphalt and the quality of the asphalt. So we lay down typically 1.25 inches of asphalt. So and part of the answer was that now we have folks that go out and test those loads, right?
Through the chair, that is correct.
How often and how much?
So through the chair, we have a Through the chair, we have a schedule of testing requirements, and it all depends on the quantity of asphalt being laid or the length of road that's being resurfaced. So there are typically a number of tests. In other words, for every 50 or 100 tons, we would take typically 2 or 3 tests for quality assurance. And that is on both asphalt cement as well as with regards to the aggregate that's being utilized to make sure that it meets the specifications.
So a test every 50 or 100 tons?
That is correct. It varies depending on the...
When, for example, one of the tests fails, right? Like, let's say it fails. What's typically done? What do you typically... So let's say, and not to say that these contractors would be buying substandard tar to lay down, but so a test fails. What do you do?
I'm sorry.
Through the chair, if a test fails, the contractor is required to remove the defective asphalt and resurface the road or relay with asphalt that meets the city's standards and specifications.
So that's it. That would be like typically what the penalty were. So they've laid down 50 or 100 tons. So 50 tons, typically, given that the roads are pretty standard width, how many kilometers of roads would that be? 50 tons of asphalt.
I don't have those exact figures as far as the length of road for a 50 to 100 ton placement of asphalt.
At an inch and a quarter.
An inch and a quarter, inch and a half, I could just estimate, and the estimate would probably be 50 meters, something to that point, 50 to 100 meters.
So 100 tons does 50 meters of asphalt, like half a football field.
Local roads.
In typical length.
That would be my estimation.
And so every roughly 50 meters of asphalt, we're having a test done.
Every 50 to 100 meters. Through the chair.
50 to 100 meters. So every half a football field to a full football field, we're getting a test done on the asphalt.
Through the chair, that is correct.
How much do we pay for a ton of asphalt?
Through the chair, it varies depending.
That's what the tender's about, right?
Yes, through the chair. I just don't have that information right in front of me right now. But typically, the past unit rates were around anywhere between, depending on the contractor, anywhere between $25 to $40 a ton. Each contractor had a different price. And I guess I'm trying to understand the difference here. And what would a contractor typically pay for a ton of asphalt? Through the chair, I don't have that information. Each contractor may either have their own plant where they're supplying their own material, or other contractors would actually have to have or sub their paving operation and therefore purchase the asphalt from that subcontractor.
Would you be able to provide me with what those numbers are typically? Like, I want to know what the differences are. I'm not interested in necessarily what a particular contractor pays, but I'd like to know. I mean, can you go to one place and get like pay for for a ton of asphalt $5 and another place $15? I want to know what that spread is can typically be, depending on also the quality of the asphalt. I guess the real question I'm getting to is this. We repaved Steeles Avenue a short time ago, and it was just a resurfacing. It was part of the federal government program, I think 2009 or something. It wasn't that long ago. The road is completely like broken up everywhere, right? And we're getting more and more potholes, we're getting more and more broken roads. And I just want to understand, do we need to pay a little more to get a better product that breaks up less? Is that something that we look at? Is that something that we...
Last question, Councillor Perusa.
Through the chair, to the question with respect to our specs on paving, they're reviewed on a regular basis. We just implemented a new spec for the 2018 contracts used in 2019. I think it should be noted that in terms of asphalt quality as a whole, it's an industry issue. The city is actually hosting a workshop through the support of the Regional Public Works Commissioners of Ontario in early May, where we're going to have experts from MTO, academics, researchers, to actually look in more detail in terms of the testing protocols, the mix of asphalt. And so we could have more information later this year in terms of the general industry direction in terms of addressing that very problem.
And would that be typically a report?
Councillor Perusa, you're over 6 minutes.
This is an important question. Would
Well,
that
you
be
know
a
what?
report
We
that
all
you would
ask
bring?
important questions. I hope we're not asking non-important questions. But did you want to go to the third round?
No, this is my final question. I just wanted to know if we, at some point, are going to have access to that type of information. That's very, very, very important. It's about our roads. You get lots of complaints about potholes, a lot of broken roads, right? And the quality of the product that they're laying down, that's fundamental to that broken road we're talking about. So how do we get a better product? How do we get a better road so that we have to fill fewer potholes? That's the question.
It's a major issue across the city.
Of course it is.
And the warranty on these roads may be an industry standard, but the industry will keep it very short.
No, he was saying that Mr. Andrea was saying that they're going to have a conference later this year with industry experts to talk about how you mix asphalt and the sort of the quality of that asphalt and the quality of those products that we're laying down. And my question to him was, are we going to be privy to that information? Are we going to, not understand it to their level, but at least understand it to a level where we can make a decision at some point to say, you know what, let's lay down a better product because we're going to get a lot more life out of it and fewer broken roads?
Well, I would hope if they're going to a conference, that it's a public conference, that they report back to us and they're learning something, they use it at the city.
I think he's talking about possibly a sit-down with folks to figure out how it is that you get to where I think my questions were driving to. But it could be wrong in that.
All righty. Thank you, Councillor Perusa.
Well, because he
okay. Are there any questions, any further questions of staff? If not, we're going to go to speakers. Speakers, I saw Deputy Mayor Minawong, Councillor Layton. Only if needed, Councillor McKelvey is on standby. Councillor Minawong.
And construction services be requested to report to the Infrastructure Environment Committee by the end of the third quarter on a plan to reduce the road resurfacing backlog on local collectors and arterial roads. So we're not doing very well. No, we're doing horribly, embarrassingly horribly. We couldn't be doing worse on our road resurfacing budget, implementation, execution. And I don't know about you, but I think the public knows it and they feel it. I don't think that they know to the extent. I don't think they know it's 85%, but they know it's bad. And this is an interesting discussion to actually understand how bad it is at 85% for local roads and then even worse for arterial roads. And so this is, to me, this is a priority. This is, this is not peas and carrots. This is the stake of municipal government. This is what we do, and we're not doing it very well. And we don't have a plan, and we have to elevate this to have a meaningful discussion about how we're going to get better and reduce this horrible, horrible backlog. So. And I'm sure this would be shared by most of our colleagues on council, that roads are, we've got to fix our roads and we're not doing it. I'm hoping to get this back by the third quarter. And I picked the third quarter specifically, as I told Councillor Cole, is because it will come before the budget discussion. And budgets are about choices. And one of my choices is to fix our roads. And I hope the rest of council will share that and move forward. I'd like to see a plan that we can start, getting that number down substantially. And the first part is owning it and actually knowing how bad the roads are. Because if you don't know how bad the roads are, you're not going to fix the problem. So that's what I want to see in the third quarter.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Minawong. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. And I have a motion that the Infrastructure and Environment Committee requests the Chief Engineer and Executive Director, Engineering and Construction Services, and the Chief Purchasing Officer to review the 2-year road work guarantee with the potential for lengthening the guarantee and report back by the fourth quarter of 2019. I wasn't as ambitious in getting the report back as Councillor Min and Wong, but if they do work in tandem and you can bring this one back earlier, all the better. I do this at the urging of the chair and the line of questioning I think that you've heard. My apologies to both chiefs for not being able to consult or not consulting in advance. This wasn't something that I had planned on moving forward. But I think like many on our roads, we're frustrated with the quality of the work that's being done. Look, maybe it's the climate that we live in, maybe it's the changing climate, maybe it's the winter maintenance taking its toll, maybe it's the utility cuts, maybe it's the emergency water main breaks, although Lou's typically got his act together, so I wouldn't blame Lou. All these things together, I think, take a massive toll. And you know what? Hamish was right at the beginning. There's no one that can tell you about the quality of the roads better than the cyclists. Better than, like, it's real easy to walk around a pothole or a little crack. It's real easy to drive, well, for the most part, around some smaller potholes. But when you're biking, not only do you know about the bike lanes, about the potholes directly in front of you, you actually know about the ones on side streets in the middle of the lane because all of the gravel that comes out to them fills the lane. So when you start getting to a rougher patch, even if you don't see the pothole, you know there's one somewhere. And I take a different bike ride home almost every day to then find where the really bad spots are, and I call them in. I sometimes have it set up so I've got my headset on and I'm dictating a message with the addresses, or when the street's particularly bad, I just send them out. You know, our teams out there do a great job filling them. But the reality is I don't think we should have to fill them so often. Like I hear that it's an industry standard, but maybe we should try to guide industry to a higher standard in this and it will probably cost a little bit more, or could cost a little bit more for us to demand a higher or a longer guarantee. But I think it'll probably pay off in the long run. So I'd be supportive of seeing us push industry a little bit on this to move that guarantee from 2 years to a higher number.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. And as you mentioned, yes, I think this is a worthwhile discussion. The warranty seems awfully short for the kind of money we're putting out. Any other speakers? Councillor Cole?
Yeah, I've just been grappling with the way of doing this, and I concur certainly with the two motions moved by Councillor Layton and Councillor Min and Wong. And I know as a committee, I think that we owe it to the residents of the city of Toronto and to the rest of our city councillors to really wave the red flag about the reality of our roads. Because it's obvious right now the trend is to just get all excited about billions of dollars on these monorail in the sky projects and a subway in everybody's backyard. Meanwhile, our local streets and roads are really in a state of being dangerous to people. You know, the number of motorists that have called me about front-end damage, flat tires. In the past, they would just complain about potholes. Now they're complaining about, you know, they can't get compensated from the city, they can't get compensated from their insurance company because their front end has been destroyed, or because the rim of their, not even their tire, the rim of their front tire has been destroyed by a pothole. So I think there is something happening, and one of the things that's happening is that I don't think we're investing enough money in our roads, because it seems all of our big, huge capital dollars are going into our wonderful rapid transit projects, and more to come. So I don't know whether as a committee we can craft, maybe at a future committee meeting, we can craft a motion basically raising this red flag, which we're trying to do with Councillor Min and Wong's motion there, that we need to look at our budgetary processes and ensure that we on this committee champion our roads and to make them safe for pedestrians. And I'll just say the last thing is, if you try to walk, cycle, drive around the major construction sites at the Allen Road and Eglinton, I dare you to try. I dare you to risk your life and go there. Go at Yonge and Eglinton. Try and cross the street somehow at Yonge and Eglinton. God forbid you should have to be in a wheelchair or a walker. It's impossible. I mean, I'm surprised people don't make human rights complaints about the fact they cannot walk the sidewalks of Toronto anymore in certain parts of the city, and we somehow expect people to make do, and they aren't making do. And our seniors especially have mobility challenges sometimes. They are afraid every morning as they go down to the corner store because of what they have to face on our sidewalks and streets. So again, I just hope that we can, as a committee, start to really get more public attention, council attention about a need to invest more dollars in our road infrastructure for enhanced road safety and mobility.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other, Councillor Peruzza?
Thank you. Yeah, maybe the way to get to a better road is by asking for, better warranties and longer warranties. I don't know, but I can tell you this. I think Councillor Layton is absolutely bang on. If you cycle or you motorcycle, you have a much you have a much greater propensity to actually notice the conditions of the roads.
Yeah.
And I tell you, no sooner do we repave a street than you go on that street, and a year or two later, already you got all those, oily patches trying to seal the cracks in the road. Why? Because the product, the asphalt you lay down, is already cracking. It's separating. So now you got all these like little oil strips. So you got somebody going out there trying to seal the cracks. Why? So that it doesn't become an embarrassment. Because those cracks then allow water to seep in under that asphalt. It freezes because of our climate conditions, the thawing and freezing, and the asphalt pops. And all of a sudden your road begins to crumble. And it begins to crumble in a very, very short period of time. I get it. I understand. If you're in the asphalt business, what would you want to have happen? If you're in the road resurfacing business, you want the road to break up fast so that you continue to have work resurfacing roads. So it's not in your interest to actually have a road that doesn't break up, that doesn't break down. Go out and drive on Highway 407. See if you see any greasy oil patches trying to seal cracks in that road. You know why you don't see that? Because it doesn't break up. And it doesn't break down. Same weather conditions, much, much better road.
The concrete, isn't it?
Whatever it is, whatever that product is, because the people who have invested in that road want the road to last. They don't want to be causing traffic jams, doing construction work on that road, relaying new asphalt or new product. They want the road unencumbered so people get to go from point A to B without encumbrances. Why? Because they're charging them for it. So they are paying attention, very, very close attention to what they're laying down. We need to do the same thing. We need to pay much, much closer attention to, you know, what the $50 million plus that we're going to spend on putting down some product on our roads, it's going to last. And if it means that we need to up the ante, then we need to pay attention to that. We need to pay attention to what they're doing on Highway 407, because they're doing that for a reason. A, they don't clog up the street. You rarely ever see any construction work happening there or any resurfacing work happening on that road, because they want to invite people to drive there, because they're paying for it. And I'm sure they're getting very, very good return for what they're doing on the road. We need to focus on that, and we need to do likewise. Because otherwise, it's absolutely abysmal. It's as Councillor Cole suggests. It's just broken up everywhere. We got like thousands of pothole backlog. We're applying people to just sort of go in and refill and reflush, and everything is going to hell in a handbasket real quick, and we can't afford it.
Thank you, Councillor Perusa. Any other speakers? No, we're good? Okay. So I believe we had 2 motions on this item.
Do it as a package.
You want to do it as a package? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item 5, Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant Landform Project. Deputy Mayor Menawong, you had held it? Yes. Welcome, Councillor Fletcher. Questions for staff? If you have.
Sure, I'll ask a question or two. This is part of a long-standing project that will allow some public access along the south end of the sewage treatment plant, which I inherited on October 22nd, 2019. Could you just let me know a little bit, is that still the plan?
Through the chair, yes, part of our discussions with the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, as well as with the City Parks and Recreation Division, is about defining the extent of public accessibility that would remain after construction along that shoreline. So we're still working out the exact details, but we're absolutely discussing how do we get public access right along that shoreline.
And then up and through the Coatsworth Cut over to, is that still part of the plan? There had been, TRCA had a plan long ago that would have put some bulrushes or other water cleaning plants in the Coatsworth Cut, and then allowed for a water-based trail to travel from the spit all the way over to the Ashbridges promontory. And I'm just wondering where that sits with this latest plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there were a number of different environmental assessments completed in and around that Coatsworth Cut area by the city and by Toronto Region Conservation Authority. What's before you is the culmination of all those years of different assessments and putting together different projects. So this will be the final constructed landform, which will put in place the final structures. Whether there's future work done after that, I'm not aware of. But this meets the Toronto Region Conservation Authority's objective of reducing the frequency that they have to dredge Coatsworth Cut and get in there to clean it, because what they were getting was a lot of silting of the sands from the bluffs. By creating some little landform pieces that are attached to Ashbridges Bay Park and coming along the bottom of the treatment plant, that reduces that amount of sedimentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Questions for staff? Speakers?
I don't know what you're going to say, so I just came to hear you. I'm going to have to wait and then beg the chair if I need to say anything. Go ahead.
Speakers? Yes, are there questions for staff for committee members? Are there speakers? There's no speakers.
Not at this time.
Okay, I've taken it in committee. I've asked twice for questions for staff, and I've asked twice for speakers. So there's no questions for staff, and there's no speakers. So we can move the item. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'm well aware of that, and I have no idea, since the deputy mayor didn't advise me of any of the issues that he has at this site. So I'm very happy to hear if he has motions or speaks, and then let's just leave it at that for now.
Yes, okay. Okay, the staff recommendations are being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 6, we have a deputant, Hamish Wilson, Eglinton Crosstown Light Rail Transit, with probably a commentary on the Scarborough subway as well. Thank you very much.
Chair, if you're short on a road backlog that could create conditions of killing people, I think questioning what your priorities are for billions of dollars is not a diatribe. It is not out of order. It is well in order. So to some degree, I really do resent your pushback on that, because it's hundreds of millions. It's not your dime. It's not even your dollar. None of you, anyway. Speaking of subways, though, it's a shame that the Eglinton line was filled in under the last Conservative government, because then we wouldn't have all of these issues they would have been dealt with 20-odd years ago. What a shame that that got filled in and we got the subway. The mere signs are not going to be enough. We need the enforcement of what these signs are and what the traffic rules are. It's a real mess up there. I have a lot of empathy for the people that are trying to, A, get through the area, do their work, the storekeepers, the pedestrians, the residents. But we need enforcement. It's just not merely signs. I trust that you're aware of this particular instance. It was an appalling video to look at, just appalling. Are there any charges against the motorists? Have they been found? So yes, go ahead, approve some signs, please. Go ahead, do it. But we need the enforcement. And I came across this interesting book recently, The Power Paradox. And in terms of enforcement and what motorists are breaking the law, a funny thing, and disrespecting pedestrians and vulnerable, it seems that the more expensive car that you have, the more prone you are to disrespecting pedestrians and otherwise going through intersections. I haven't fully digested the background of the study, but yeah, if you have faster cars and costlier cars, you tend to want to use them without actually respecting pedestrians. So that would be an argument for a vehicle to registration tax, I think. So yes, go ahead, please approve these signs, but quite honestly, we need to have enforcement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, we'll bring it into committee. I assume you've read Councillor Matlow's correspondence. Any questions for staff? Any speakers? Someone like to adopt the recommendations?
And this is in Councillor Matlow's?
That's... Yeah, these are minor turn restrictions and rules which will have appropriate signage, and when police services have it, enforcement as well. I'll move the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. .7 Coordinated Street Furniture Program Agreement Update. Councillor Layton, you have the item?
Yeah, so my two questions. One, these hand warmer things, that's pretty neat. So we got them from Montreal. Do we know if, like, they're functional in Montreal, they're not breaking down, they're...
Quebec City, I think is what.
Quebec City, sorry, I thought it was Montreal for some reason.
Yes, through the chair. So Astral installed 17 this year in Quebec City, and they've been quite successful.
But we've got, like, this is the type of thing that you install, they break easily. I'm just worried that, like, we're going to be going down in a direction that...
Councillor, given a couple of the issues that have been raised around these heaters, what we've determined with Astral Media is that we would only install a maximum of 5 over the next winter, and we would monitor
And then see
them.
what happens.
Yes.
Okay. I've got some concerns around energy consumption and efficiency and them, but I think with 5, I think we're probably okay to give them a try and see what happens. Okay. The second line of questioning was actually around garbage bin replacement. Man, these things break constantly. The existing ones, the first gen ones. Is there any? We're switching over entirely to a square or a rectangle, correct?
No, we're not, Councillor.
Keeping the old ones?
We're keeping the old ones to the extent possible, and we've just been through an exercise this summer where we've refurbished 2,500 of the original round litter bins, and we're monitoring the situation closely. We're also proposing increased cleaning as the report sets out, so we believe the increased cleaning will also add to the maintenance ability.
And that will include fixing broken ones. We'll be increasing, because that is a complaint I get constantly about broken bins, doors that won't shut, they're flapping out into the road, into the public right-of-way. That's something that is included in...
Councillor, it is, and we're over the next 2 years, we're working through refurbishing all the existing circular plastic bins. And only at that time would we determine whether replacements are required, but we would have the authority to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
So you're only seeking authorization to install 5 of these heaters, yes?
That's correct.
And I raised this question with you, this issue with you before, but perhaps maybe you can answer it publicly. There might be an arrangement where if you put one of these heaters in one of these bus shelters, that instead of transit users using these bus shelters, they might be used by other individuals who might have a longer-term stay in these bus shelters, which isn't the purpose of these heaters. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And historically, that has not occurred in the other places where these heaters have existed?
We're not aware of that, Councillor. I mean, we are aware that we do have people stay in transit shelters in the city right now, and we have an arrangement with Streets to Homes when that happens.
Right. So if someone were to stay in there, let's say there were a bunch of individuals who are hanging out there just because it's warm. That's not what the bus shelter was meant for, right?
That is correct.
And if one of these heaters was used for that purpose, there could be a conversation with the local councillor to have those heaters removed. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Okay. Move the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now we're on to new items. 2 items from the Mayor's office. Number 8, I hope you all have it. It is stormwater management. Questions for staff?
Speak to it.
Questions for staff? No? Speakers? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
Yeah, I'm happy to move this item forward. This is one of the mayor's key projects that he wants to move forward. He wants to accelerate our stormwater management, which I can't imagine anyone would be opposed to. But it's a great initiative. We need clean water. There are too many instances where our stormwater goes into lakes and streams, and anything that we can do to accelerate this project, I think, is worthwhile. And you know, I think that the plan to come forward in Q2 is a example, or shows what an important initiative this is for the city. And I'm happy. I hope that the committee will support this unanimously.
I just have a question related to this. Nope. Very brief question.
Of me?
Of him, sure. He's moving the thing.
Oh, he gotcha.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I guess
question for the mover.
Yeah, the question is, remind me, who gets the money from the red light camera fines? Do we get that, or does the provincial government get that?
I'm sorry, I might be missing something here, but we're on Toronto's Stormwater Management Program.
Oh, no, I thought he was moving this thing.
That's next.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can.
Vision Zero. I thought it was Vision Zero.
Yeah, no. Councillor Peruzas, give us a couple of minutes. I know you're excited about Vision Zero, so we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Any questions for the mover? Any other speakers?
Yes.
Councillor Layton.
Sure. I'm prepared to support the motion, but with just two observations. One, it's really not calling for anything new. Like when you read the recommendations, a plan to accelerate the city's, like realistically, we've had some of these opportunities before during the budget process. I believe we've voted on accelerating the wet weather flow master plan actually several times in the last two terms of council. I'm going to be digging through that because I'm pretty positive our colleague formerly of East York, Councillor Davis, got something in front of council regarding that. And also, like, just asking for a report on the range of provincial and federal infrastructure programs available. That is nothing new. Where I would make one other observation. We had put in front of us 2 policy requests from the mayor's office this morning. 2 major ones that are citywide, of citywide importance, so much so that we actually have plans with them in the name. And the courtesy that he gave this committee was absolutely zero. Like we weren't given any advance warning to prepare motions. I prepared motions on each. I've now walked back the one on stormwater. Any advance notice from the mayor's office would have helped prepare for questions of staff and for possibly some motions to improve the recommendations being made. I just find it not helpful to put something of this level of importance out without any warning to the committee. And in the future, I would just appreciate that we get some kind of heads up that it's going to be added to the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. This will be coming back to committee and then I believe going back up to council, so you will get other opportunities. You may also want to bring a member's motion if you feel there are any gaps here. Council. Any other speakers? Okay. Motion before us, City of Toronto's Stormwater Management Program. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Last item. Sure. Okay, let's dial that back. This is the City of Toronto Stormwater Management Program. The mayor's motions. Recorded vote. All those in favor?
All those in favor, Councillor Cole, Councillor Layton, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Minnan-Wong, Councillor Peruzza. That motion carries unanimously.
Yes, item 9. These are, this is items related to Vision Zero 2.0. Questions for staff? Councillor Perruzza? We have to hear it again.
Remind me, who benefits when we ding Torontonians that through red light cameras? Who gets the benefit of that?
And we should ding them if they run red lights.
This is. I just want to know who gets the money.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, the funds do go in part to the province, but likewise to the city they're collected through courts. Yeah. So there's a victim
I'm sorry,
surcharge.
say it again. So
basically,
you get a fine. What is it, like $300, right?
Yeah, it's about $365. There's a victim surcharge fee, I should say, of about $65. That goes to the province. The remainder basically goes to the city revenues.
And how much of the $365 does the city get?
Roughly about $300 per charge.
So the city gets $300 and the province gets 65?
Correct. Yeah.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, that's not really like that's true.
I believe the staff has answered the question.
I thought it was a fine under the Highway Traffic Act. I thought it was like a provincial fine. How do we get the money? How do we get the money for that?
In the mail.
Well, through the chair. So when a person receives a ticket, the fines are basically collected through courts. There's obviously costs associated with running the program that take a significant portion of that. But again, the ratio is there's a victim surcharge fine, which goes to the province. I believe it's roughly about $65, and the remaining $300 basically stays with the city.
Because that's what it costs us to administer the program?
Through the chair.
That's how we justify keep hanging on to the $300?
A portion of that goes back to administering the program, but there is a delta there.
There's a what?
There is a delta there. There is a revenue aspect to it.
And how much would that be? Do you know?
So through the chair, typically the revenue coming back from the red light camera program in the past had been on the order of about $9 million a year, of which the operating cost was about $2 million. So yeah, there's about $7 million going back into the general revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perruzza. Other questions for staff?
I did not know.
On the letter?
Yes. Vision Zero.
Yes. Yeah, just question is, what I find hard to explain to people who ask me, there are some school safety zones or senior safety zones, community safety zones that are already in place with signs. And then in other areas, what I thought there should be some signage, there isn't. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Baycrest on Bathurst Street. It's, it's senior center for the world there. There's no sign that say seniors crossing or nothing whatsoever. And I asked this when we had a meeting about Better Bathurst Street, where we're trying to make Bathurst the Champs-Élysées of Toronto, and we're just having these pedestrian issues. And don't laugh, Bathurst Street is going to be the envy of Toronto when we get through with it. You'll be able to have your cappuccino there and stroll and get gelato, and the best bagels in the world are there. Anyways, I just, the other question I had, the other inconsistency is, like, I've got schools that are major arterials, and there's not even one sign that says school crossing. Like, for instance, I've got Armour Heights Public School on Wilson Avenue, and there's no signage at all that you're coming anywhere near a school. And then some schools have got a school crossing sign. They've got the digital speed indicator. By the way, I just heard the other day a car ran into a digital speed indicator post. That's how crazy they drive. But so how do I get some pattern or uniformity here of the signage, the beginning of community safety zone signage or school safety zone signage? Because it's right now it's very inconsistent. What's the game plan?
Through the chair, we're actively expanding the use of school safety zones as a measure to improve road safety and traffic safety around school zones. And we have a prioritization methodology which identifies schools within a 1.6 kilometer radius of where there's been a serious injury or fatality collision that involves school children and other collisions located within that zone. So we are prioritizing by ward and expanding on a basis of about 80 schools per year. The school safety zone involves not only that gateway signage, but also other measures such as pavement markings and watch your speed signs, and those elements to envelop the school in a various types of measures to improve road safety and reduce speeds.
Yeah, and I think you made an interesting comment about where there have been accidents that have occurred, and I think that's a very valid sort of criteria. Like I know I'm working with Councillor Perks, where I'm asking him to respond to a question from my daughter. My granddaughter goes to the largest public school in Canada, probably. It's called Runnymede Public School. Okay, there's 1,200 kids on Runnymede, no signs. How is that possible, that there wouldn't be one school crossing sign in front of 1,200 kids?
Through the chair, Councillor, we can certainly look specifically at Runnymede. One of the other factors which I know personally that Runnymede has is a high percentage of school population with children who walk to school. Those are also factored in to the prioritization methodology to make sure we're addressing places where there have been a lot of collisions, where there have been collisions involving children, and where children are more exposed to traffic because they have more people walking. So we'll take that back to look specifically at Runnymede. I know that Councillor Doucette did emphasize the need for school safety zones at Runnymede when this was debated previously.
Yeah, and I would just recommend that one of the criteria is schools, especially elementary schools that are near major arterials, they've got to be a priority, because even though there may not be a listed rate of accident to pedestrian accidents, there's got to be some priority given these major arterial roads where there's horrendous amounts of traffic, and the motorist doesn't even know. If you don't reside in the area, you may not know that there's a school with 1,200 children up the street because there's no sign, and it's just maddening to me. I'll give you another school in Councillor Bilal's areas. One of the most dangerous schools in the world, I think, is St. Nicholas de Bari. You know that, Councillor Peruzza, where you go that turn on Rogers Road, the blind turn. There's no signs, and these kids, and the kids are there trying to get across that crazy dead man's curve there on Rogers Road, just the other side of Caledonia. No signs. So. And even my own Bialik school, I've got the parents at Bialik saying, we're on Bathurst Street. Everybody's schlepping up and down Bathurst Street, trying to get across the street. And why aren't there signs near Bialik School, which is
Councillor Cole, first of all, you're closing in on 6 minutes. Second of all, these are very local issues, and a request through transportation for adequate signing, I'm sure.
It's not that, Mr. Chair. I'm asking for some kind of criteria that takes into account schools like Bialik, which you know well, is on a major arterial. No sign. Runnymede. So there's got to be a better criteria for safety for our children.
Well, under our school safety policy, private and independent schools are included. So I know the school, and you are correct. They should have proper signage. It should be a school safety zone. You have to work closely with staff to get it implemented. Last week I was at two parent council meetings to work on traffic management and strategy. It's a major issue. There's over 700 schools across the city where there's total chaos coming in the morning and a pickup in the afternoon. You have to work on the local level with staff.
But I'm just saying, as a committee, we should give some guidelines in terms of major arterials. That's where I not only talked about Bialik, I talked about St. Nicholas de Bari, I talked about Runnymede. These are all over the city where there's schools on major arterials that need special attention, and they are very unique.
Understood. For the most part, it's delegated to staff, but when you think there are any gaps, it can be driven by the local councillor.
But we, as a committee, should look at the criteria here, because I'm not happy with the way this is unfolding. We need to step up our game here as a committee.
Well, I was kind of hoping this would go to council. It is not. It's going to staff, coming back here, and then the whole package will go up to council.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right. Any other questions for staff? Deputy Mayor Wong?
Yeah, can you remind me, are there bylaws or any other legislation to stop jaywalking mid-block?
Through the chair, jaywalking is not an offense in Ontario. There is an offense related to obstructing traffic if you're walking when there's not an appropriate gap, but jaywalking in itself is not a term within our province.
So leaving aside the term, we'll just put that aside now. I'm not going to talk about it again.
Is crossing the street a crime?
If someone crosses mid-block and is an obstacle to traffic or creates a dangerous situation, is that an offense?
Through the chair, it would very much depend on the circumstances. Crossing mid-block is allowed.
So perhaps you can help me. The thing that you talked about, can you repeat that again? What is the offense? Can you reference me? Is it
obstructing traffic?
Sorry, I'm just quickly trying to get through this, and there's a certain level of specificity that I require. What is the law?
Let him ask.
Councillor, I don't have the legislation in front of me, but it's something to the effect of obstructing traffic.
Can you get that to me?
Of course.
And is it my understanding as well that anything with regard to, what is commonly referred to as a zombie law, for example, someone walking across the street while they're reading their cell phone and they have headphones on, we can't do anything about. We don't have the jurisdiction to deal with anything in that regard. That has to be dealt.
Outlaw the zombies.
That has to be dealt with by the provincial government, correct?
That's correct. That would be a Highway Traffic Act.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you.
They don't look left or right.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Any other questions for staff?
Glad you asked that question. I didn't know that jaywalking was legal.
It's not.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, there was a motion to council to affect fines for people looking at their handheld devices while crossing. The motion did not carry, I believe. Zombies, you'll have to bring your own zombie motion. No, we have to move this item. And we're going to speakers because there is a motion, an amendment. Councillor Layton?
Yes, thank you very much. The motion is, and it adds a couple things that I think add upon what's being requested by the mayor. In recommendation 1A, to add collector and arterial roads to ones being reviewed for speed changes. Recommendation 1B, to add an upgrading intersection crossings so that we're not just looking at mid-block crossings, but also upgrading some existing crossings, paint, going from a PXO to an actual to lights. And then 3, recommendation 1C, by amending including protected intersections so that it includes the idea of protected intersections. Sorry, this adds to the idea around safer road design to include protected intersections, which I know staff are evaluating and looking at now, but I think they're evaluating and looking at everything that was on the list. So I just wanted to add something specific that I think would be interested to see, and hopefully we move it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other speakers? All right, we have the amendments for the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And the motion is amended. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Enjoy the rest of the day.